When we look back at the Victorian era, we have this very rigid mental map.
Oh, absolutely.
We see the stiff collars, the London fog, the repressed emotions. And if I ask you to picture a Victorian poetess, you probably conjure up a very specific image.
Right. Someone safe, maybe a bit fragile, writing quiet verses in a parlor.
Exactly. Someone devout, writing about flowers and Jesus and not much else. The angel in the house, as the saying goes.
It's an incredibly sticky archetype. It frames women of that era as purely domestic, passive creatures who existed solely to, soothe the brows of their husbands and manage the household.
Right. And then if I say the name Rossetti, most people immediately pivot. They go straight to Dante Gabriel Rossetti.
Of course. The wild hair, the wombats in the garden, the opium, the bohemian king of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood.
He was a massive personality.
He sucked up a lot of the oxygen in the room, and any room he was in, really.
But today, we are pushing him to the side. We are focusing on the other Rossetti, Christina Rossetti. And the reason we're doing this deep dive is that the pious spinster image, it's not just incomplete, it's actively misleading.
It's a total misreading of her character and her work.
Because if you dig into the letters, the biographies, and critically the reception of her work at the time, you don't find a passive observer. You find a woman who was arguably, one of the darkest, most complex, and most technically brilliant poets of the entire 19th century.
I'm really glad you used the word darkest, because even though she's the one who wrote some of the Christmas carols we all sing, her mind was dwelling in some very shadowy, very intense places.
It's a huge contradiction.
A huge one. And after Elizabeth Barrett Browning died in 1861, the critics didn't really look for a man to replace her as the great poet of the age. They looked directly at Christina Rossetti and essentially said, she is the one. She is the foremost female poet of her day.
That's a heavy crown to wear, especially in that era.
It is, but she wore it differently. She's such an enigma because she lived at the absolute epicenter of the coolest, loudest, most revolutionary art movement in London.
The Pre-Raphaelites.
Exactly. Yet she cultivated this persona of silence and refusal. A quiet rebel is a great way to put it. She navigated severe nervous breakdowns, this intense religious extremism, and a really, really complicated relationship with the concept of love and marriage.
So that is our mission today. We're going to strip away that saintly lady veneer. We need to understand how she operated within the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, not just as a pretty face on a canvas, but as a sharp, insightful critic.
A participant, not just a muse.
Exactly. And we're going to deconstruct the absolute fever dream that is Goblin Market. I mean, we have to.
We could spend the whole time on just that poem.
We really could. And I really want to understand why she chose loneliness. Because looking at the source material, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't because she didn't have options. It feels like it was a strategy.
A strategy of self-preservation. That's a great way to frame it. She was protecting something.
We have a lot of ground to cover: biographies, letters, publication history, the poetry itself. Let's start at the very beginning. The Rossetti hothouse. Because she wasn't just born into a standard British middle-class family, was she?
Oh, not even close. If you walked into 38 Charlotte Street in London around, say, 1835, you wouldn't feel like you were in England. You'd feel like you walked into a political salon in Naples.
Really? That's specific.
Absolutely. Christina was born there in 1830, the youngest of four. Her father, Gabriele Rossetti, wasn't just a dad, he was a political exile, a revolutionary.
Okay, so the sources describe him as a poet and a carbonaro. A revolutionary.
Yes. He was from the Abruzzo region of Italy. He had to flee in 1824 because his poetry was a little too supportive of the revolutionary cause against the Bourbon monarchy. So he lands in London, manages to become a professor of Italian at King's College, and turns his home into this magnet for every Italian exile, scholar, artist, and revolutionary passing through the city.
So the house is just buzzing with politics and poetry and Italian accents.
Constantly. Christina is growing up with Dante Alighieri effectively being the fifth child in the family.
She was steeped in it from birth.
Essentially. And Petrarch. The house was loud, intellectual, and bilingual. And then you have her mother, Frances Polidori. And this is where the literary pedigree gets really gothic.
Okay, I'm ready.
Frances was the sister of John William Polidori.
Wait, Polidori, that's Lord Byron's physician, right? That Polidori.
The very same. The man who was there at the Villa Diodati in 1816 during the year without a summer, the night Mary Shelley started writing Frankenstein.
No way.
Yes. Polidori actually wrote The Vampire during that same trip, which basically invented the modern aristocratic vampire genre.
So on her father's side, you have Italian political revolutionaries,
Right.
and on her mother's side, you have the guy who literally invented the vampire.
That explains a lot about the tone of Christina's work, doesn't it?
It explains everything. The passion, the darkness, the morbidity. It wasn't a normal childhood.
Far from it. And the siblings, Dante Gabriel, William Michael, and Maria, they were a powerhouse quartet, as one biographer puts it. Incredibly bright, competitive, creative, and very, very close. They even had nicknames for each other. They called themselves the Two Storms, which were Dante and Christina.
The passionate ones.
Right. And the Two Calms, which were William and Maria.
And the young Christina. The sources say she wasn't the gloomy recluse yet. She was the lively one, the stormy one.
Very lively. There's a fantastic anecdote where, before she could even write, she dictated her first story to her mother. It was about a dervish named Hassan. I mean, that just shows the confidence. She was surrounded by words and stories, so she just joined in.
And she was educated entirely at home.
Entirely, absorbing everything. Religious tracts, fairy tales, classics like Keats and Scott, and a lot of Gothic horror novels like Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho.
So she had a rich inner world. But she wasn't a shut-in. She liked London.
Oh, she loved London. Unlike her parents, who always felt the pain of exile, Christina felt completely at home. She visited the zoo, Madame Tussauds. The sources show she was engaging with the world, curious.
But then we see this massive shift in the 1840s. A crisis hits the family, and it seems to be the trauma that defines the rest of her life. What happened?
The whole world fell apart. The economy of the family completely collapsed. Her father's health failed catastrophically. He developed chronic bronchitis, he was losing his sight, and he was likely suffering from a severe, debilitating depression. He had to give up his teaching post at King's College.
Which means the money stopped coming in. The main source of income was gone.
Exactly. And in Victorian London, that is a precipice you do not want to fall over. The slide from middle-class respectability to poverty was terrifyingly quick.
And the family dynamics just inverted.
Completely. The mother, Frances, who had been managing this intellectual household, had to go out and start teaching Italian. Her sister Maria, who was brilliant in her own right, had to go out and work as a live-in governess.
And from what I read, Christina viewed the prospect of being a governess with absolute horror.
She dreaded it. It was the standard fate for a refined, educated woman with no money, but to her it meant servitude. It meant a total loss of your autonomy, your time, your intellectual freedom.
But she didn't have to do it.
No, and here is the tragedy. Because she was the youngest and always seen as the delicate one, she was the one left at home, left to care for her sick, depressed, and probably very difficult father, while everyone else was out working to keep the family afloat.
That is an absolute pressure cooker.
Yeah.
You're a teenager, you're creative, you're full of this stormy energy, and you're trapped in a dark house with a dying parent, watching your family slide into poverty.
And the result was, unfortunately, predictable. At age 14 in 1845, she suffered a severe nervous breakdown. She had to leave what little formal schooling she had, and the lively child just vanished. She became withdrawn, melancholic, and suffered from a range of physical ailments for the rest of her life.
And this is where the religion takes hold, isn't it? It's not just a comfort. It becomes an entire operating system for her life.
An operating system is the perfect analogy. It wasn't just going to church. This was a specific, intense flavor of Christianity. She, her mother, and her sister Maria became deeply involved in the Anglo-Catholic movement.
Sometimes called the Oxford movement or Tractarianism.
Exactly.
Can you break that down for us? How is that different from regular Church of England services at the time?
Think of it as the Church of England trying to reclaim its Catholic heritage before the Reformation. It was all about high ritual, heavy on symbolism, the importance of confession, and a very, very intense focus on personal sin, self-examination, and the path to redemption.
So it's not a casual Sunday faith.
Not at all. It was a rigorous, demanding spiritual lifestyle, and for Christina, this became the lens through which she saw everything. Every earthly pleasure had to be weighed against the eternal soul. It provided a structure for her suffering, giving meaning to her pain, but it also imposed incredible restrictions on her.
So she creates this rigid, ascetic framework for herself, right as her brother, Dante Gabriel, is about to launch the most rebellious, colorful, and sensual art movement in Britain.
The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, established in 1848.
The timing is just incredible. Talk about a clash of worlds.
It's a fundamental split in the Rossetti siblings. You have Dante and his friends, the PRB, who are all about nature, bright colors, truth to life, challenging the stuffy Royal Academy, and living this very bohemian, sometimes scandalous lifestyle.
And right in the middle of it is Christina, the Anglo-Catholic ascetic. It seems like she would have run a mile away.
But she couldn't. It was her family. And she wasn't just in the room, she was the face of it. That's the deepest irony. If you look at the very first PRB paintings, you are looking at Christina Rossetti.
She was the model for the Virgin Mary, wasn't she?
Yes, in two of Dante Gabriel's earliest and most important paintings. She's Mary in The Girlhood of Mary Virgin from 1848, and she's Mary again in Ecce Ancilla Domini, which means Behold the Handmaiden of the Lord in 1850.
So she is literally the icon of the movement's debut.
Literally. When people thought of the Pre-Raphaelite woman in those first couple years, they were thinking of her face. Those heavy eyelids, the long neck, that contemplative, serious expression.
It's so strange to think of her as the visual symbol of revolution she was, at best, sort of ambivalent about.
Ambivalent is the perfect word. She supported her brothers fiercely, but she was never seduced by the lifestyle. She saw the vanity in it.
But this is where the popular narrative usually stops. She was the sister who sat for the paintings. It's a footnote. But she was writing for them, too.
She absolutely was. The PRB had a literary journal called The Germ.
Which is a terrible name, by the way.
A truly awful name. It sounds infectious, like you need to wash your hands after reading it.
And it didn't last long, did it?
No, only 4 issues. It was a commercial disaster. But Christina published 7 poems in it. She used a pseudonym, Ellen Allen, but anyone in their circle would have known it was her.
So at 20 years old, she's in print, right alongside her famous brother and his friends.
Right, so she wasn't just a muse, she was a creator. And frankly, if you read the journal now, modern critics often argue her contributions were the strongest and most mature pieces in the whole publication.
And she wasn't just a creator, she was a critic, a very sharp one. I want to dive into that poem in the artist's studio, because when I read this, I felt like I was witnessing a very polite, very poetic murder.
It is a devastatingly sharp piece of analysis. It was written in 1856. So by this time, her brother Dante Gabriel is completely obsessed with Elizabeth Siddal, who was his primary muse and future wife. And he is painting her over and over and over again as a saint, as a tragic heroine, as a lover.
And Christina's watching this happen. She's in the studio.
She walks into the studio, sees all these canvases, and she writes, "One face looks out from all his canvases, one self-same figure sits or walks or leans." She describes how he paints the woman as a queen, a nameless girl, a saint, an angel.
But then the poem pivots.
It pivots hard. She says the artist feeds upon her face by day and night.
Feeds upon her face. That's not romantic language. That is predatory. It's almost vampire language, going back to her uncle.
It is. It's about consumption, not adoration. And then she delivers the killing blow, the lines that just stop you in your tracks. She says he paints her not as she is, but as she fills his dream.
Wow. Not as she is, but as she fills his dream.
One of the most profound critiques of the male gaze ever written. She is saying that this so-called pre-Raphaelite worship of women isn't actually about the women at all. It's about male artistic ego. It's narcissism.
The artist is just projecting his own fantasy onto a silent object.
Precisely. He doesn't love the woman. He loves his own artistic vision of the woman. He's feeding his own dream, not seeing her reality.
And she's calling out her own brother for erasing the humanity of the woman he claims to love.
Yeah.
That must have been incredibly tense.
Incredibly. And she could only write that because she was on the inside. She knew what it felt like to be the face on the canvas, to be told to sit still and look holy while the men discussed art with a capital A. She's asserting that the muse has eyes and a mind, and she's judging the artist. It completely upends the power dynamic.
That creates such a tension in her life. She's part of this revolutionary group, but she's also the moral conscience sitting in the corner taking notes.
And that tension, that internal pressure, it just explodes in 1862 when she publishes her own collection, Goblin Market and Other Poems.
This is the big one. This is the moment she steps out of everyone's shadow. And weirdly, her brother Dante Gabriel illustrated it.
Which is fascinating, isn't it? Because his illustrations are incredibly sensual. The frontispiece shows the two sisters in bed together, and the title page shows the goblins swarming Lizzie. He really leaned into the strange, seductive, and slightly sinister vibe of the title poem.
Okay, we have to talk about Goblin Market. If you are listening to this and you haven't read it, you need to stop and find it online. It is. Yeah. It's wild.
It's unlike anything else.
It's a narrative poem, it's quite long, and it's about two sisters, Laura and Lizzie, who live together in a cottage. And every evening, They hear these goblin merchants selling fruit down by the river.
Come buy our orchard fruits. Come buy, come buy.
It's one of the most famous and hypnotic opening sequences in Victorian poetry. The goblins themselves are described as these animalistic creatures. One has a cat's face, one's like a rat.
And the fruit they're selling, it's not just apples and pears.
No, it's this lush, exotic, overwhelming list. Plump unpecked cherries, wild freeborn cranberries, pineapples, blackberries, apricots, strawberries. The description is pure sensory overload. It's meant to be intoxicating.
And Laura, the curious sister, is entranced. But they have no money. So she pays with a lock of her golden hair and a tear.
Which is already a massive red flag in any fairy tale logic. You never, ever give a goblin a piece of yourself, your hair, your name, anything. It's a huge mistake.
Yeah.
And she eats the fruit. And the poem describes it as this ecstatic, almost transcendent experience. She sucked and sucked and sucked the more fruits which that unknown orchard bore.
But then she goes home, and the next day she begins to waste away. She's suffering from a terrible withdrawal. She longs for more fruit, but she can no longer hear the goblins cry. He's aging rapidly, her hair turns gray, and she's clearly dying. The fruit has acted like a poison or a powerful addiction.
So the other sister, Lizzie, the good, cautious sister, decides she has to save Laura. She goes to the goblins to get fruit for her.
Right. But she's smart. She takes a silver penny. She's going to conduct a proper transaction. She wants to buy the fruit and take it home. But the goblins aren't interested in commerce. They turn violent.
They don't want her money. They want her to eat.
Exactly. And they attack her. They try to force feed her the fruit. They pull her hair, tear her dress. They squeezed out the juice that syruped all her face and lodged in every dimple. They basically assault her with this fruit.
And this scene, reading it, it's incredibly intense. It feels like a symbolic sexual assault.
It is vividly assaultive. But Lizzie stands there like a rock, refusing to open her mouth. Like a lily in a flood, the poem says. She endures the abuse without partaking. She just lets them cover her in juice.
And then she runs home.
She runs home, covered in this sticky juice and pulp, and she tells Laura to kiss it off her face. Her exact words are, hug me, kiss me, suck my juices, eat me, drink me, love me.
Which is, I mean, that is some astonishingly charged language.
It is, and Laura kisses the juice off Lizzie's face, and it acts as a painful antidote. It burns her lips like poison, but then it breaks the fever. It cures her. She is saved.
Okay, so what on earth is this poem about? Because I've seen interpretations that range from, it's a charming story for children, all the way to it's about heroin addiction, and it's a coded exploration of lesbian desire.
And the incredible answer is yes. It is all of those things and more. That's the genius of Rossetti. The poem acts as a mirror for whatever the critic wants to find. It supports multiple, even contradictory interpretations at the same time.
Let's break some of those down. The religious angle seems like the most obvious starting point since we know she was so devout.
It's a crystal clear allegory of sin and redemption from an Anglo-Catholic perspective. Laura is Eve falling into temptation by eating the forbidden fruit. She represents fallen humanity.
And Lizzie.
Lizzie acts as a Christ figure. She goes into the wilderness, into the darkness. She willingly suffers violence and humiliation, and she offers her own body, eat me, drink me, as a Eucharistic sacrifice to save her sister. It fits the theology perfectly. The saving grace is mediated through a pure figure.
That tracks completely, but then you have the social angle, which is maybe even more radical for its time.
This is where her real-world experience comes in. This isn't just theory for her.
Right, tell us more about her work at the Highgate Penitentiary, because this grounds the poem in a very real, very grim reality.
Yes. From 1859 to 1870, so right when she was writing Goblin Market, Rossetti volunteered at the St. Mary Magdalene Penitentiary in Highgate. This was a house of refuge for so-called fallen women, prostitutes, unmarried mothers, women who had been cast out of polite society.
So she is spending her days listening to the stories of women who have been ruined by sexual temptation, ruined by the market.
Precisely. She saw the real-world consequences. In Victorian society, a respectable woman has one primary commodity, her virtue. Once it's spent or sold, she's worthless. She's cast out. In Goblin Market, Rossetti is writing a radically different ending.
How so?
Usually, in Victorian novels and poems, the fallen woman dies. That's the only way to restore social order. Think of Little Emily and David Copperfield. But in this poem, the fallen woman Laura is saved. And crucially, she's not saved by a man or a priest or by marriage. She's saved by another woman, by her sister.
That is a massive subversion of the trope. It's female solidarity as the agent of redemption.
It's an astonishingly feminist text in that regard. It rejects the idea that a woman's fall is a permanent state. It suggests that redemption is possible through sisterhood and unconditional love. It's a message directly for the women she was working with at Highgate.
And then there's the erotic interpretation,
Hmm.
because you cannot read those lines without blushing a little. The language is so physical.
You really can't. The poem is drenched in sensuality, the sucking of the fruit, the juices, the final scene between the sisters. It's incredibly oral, incredibly lush. Many modern critics have argued that the goblins represent male sexual aggression and the fruit is forbidden sexual knowledge. The attack on Lizzie, where they smear their fluids on her face, is vividly violent and can be read as a symbolic rape.
And the final scene is this incredibly intimate, physical moment between two women that is both healing and intensely erotic.
It's a work of immense and immensely controlled desire. It feels like she's channeling all this repressed energy. We know she lived a very contained, chaste life, but the poem is an explosion of sensory detail and barely suppressed passion.
It's like the repression is a powerful fuel.
I think that's exactly it. By locking everything down in her daily life, she built up this incredible pressure that could only be vented into the poetry. If she had lived a loose, bohemian life like her brother, she might never have written something this strange and this intense. The constraint forced the creativity into this bizarre, brilliant, unforgettable shape.
Speaking of her locking everything down, we have to talk about her love life, or her lack of one. Because looking at the biography, she had options. This wasn't a case of her sitting alone because she was unwanted or unlovable. She was sitting alone because she said no.
She was a master of renunciation. She had 3 major suitors that we know of, and she rejected all of them, each for a very specific, principled reason.
Let's run through the roster. Suitor number 1, James Collinson.
Collinson was a painter and one of the 7 founding members of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. He painted a very lovely, very sensitive portrait of Christina. They were engaged in 1848. It was a done deal.
Yeah, so what happened?
Collinson had a crisis of faith. He was tormented by religious doubt. He'd been a Roman Catholic, converted to the Church of England to join the PRB, and then, while engaged to Christina, he decided he had to revert to Roman Catholicism.
And for Christina, the devout Anglo-Catholic, that was the deal breaker.
A total deal breaker. The gap between Anglo-Catholicism and Roman Catholicism might seem small to us today, but in mid-19th century England, it was a chasm. The Oxford movement defined itself in opposition to Rome. For her, it was a matter of eternal truth. She broke the engagement in 1850.
And it devastated her.
Absolutely. The sources say she collapsed in the hallway when she saw him by chance afterwards. It broke her heart, but she would not compromise on her theology. Her faith came first.
Okay, suitor number 2. This one seems to have been the big love of her life. Charles Bagot Cayley.
The absent-minded scholar. He was a linguist, a translator of Dante. By all accounts, they were soulmates. They had a deep intellectual and emotional bond. Her brother William wrote that she loved him deeply, more than anyone else.
So what was the problem this time?
He was an agnostic, or at least he had what she considered to be religious scruples. He just wasn't religious enough.
So she loved him. She connected with him intellectually, but she wouldn't marry him because he didn't share her specific faith.
She turned him down in 1866. She remained incredibly close friends with him until he died. She even acted as the executor of his will, but she wouldn't marry him. In her view, marriage was a sacrament, a spiritual union ordained by God. If they weren't aligned on the eternal stuff, she couldn't do it.
That is a level of integrity, or you could say stubbornness, that is hard to wrap your head around today. To give up what seems to be true love for a theological principle.
It's the concept of renunciation made real. She genuinely believed that by giving up earthly happiness, she was keeping herself pure for something greater. But you feel the cost of that choice in her poetry. There is so much longing, so much grief for what might have been. It's not the poetry of someone who doesn't care. It's the poetry of someone who wants it desperately, but holds herself back.
There's that famous painting by the symbolist Fernand Knopf, I Lock My Door Upon Myself.
Yes, inspired by a line from her poem, Who Shall Deliver Me? That line, I lock my door upon myself, is essentially her motto. She controlled her world by shutting it out.
And there was a third suitor, wasn't there? John Brett.
Yes, another painter. He was very persistent, but she just shut him down completely. And her poem, No Thank You, John, is thought to be about him. It's hilariously, brutally blunt. I never said I loved you, John. Why will you tease me day by day?
She doesn't pull any punches.
None at all. I have no heart. Perhaps I have not, but then you're mad to take offense that I don't give you what I have not got.
It's almost a modern breakup text. She wasn't afraid to be direct and final. Let's move to her later years. Because while she's writing these beautiful, melancholy poems and navigating these complex emotional decisions, her body is effectively attacking her.
Her health was always fragile ever since that breakdown at 14. But in 1872, she was diagnosed with Graves' disease. It's a serious autoimmune disorder affecting the thyroid.
And in the 19th century, the treatment for that was...
basically nothing effective. It was a terrible ordeal. It caused her eyes to protrude, it darkened her skin, it made her hair fall out, and it caused heart palpitations and extreme fatigue. It was disfiguring and exhausting, and she had a near-fatal crisis with it that left her an invalid for years.
And that wasn't the end of it.
No. Later, in 1893, she developed breast cancer.
She really went through the ringer physically.
She underwent a mastectomy, which was a brutal, agonizing surgery in 1893 without modern anesthetic or aftercare. The cancer returned, and she eventually died in December 1894.
But before she died, she wrote quite a bit about death. And her attitude wasn't one of fear. It was almost a kind of coolness.
Indifference is a good word for it. Look at her most famous poem on the subject, Song. It starts, "When I am dead, my dearest, sing no sad songs for me.
Plant thou no roses at my head, nor shady cypress tree."
She tells her lover not to mourn. She says, "Just let me be. And if thou wilt, remember, and if thou wilt, forget." It's so strikingly modern. She's rejecting the entire Victorian obsession with elaborate mourning rituals, the black crepe, the weeping, the monumental funerals.
What do you think she's saying there?
She's saying, I'll be in the twilight, I'll be dreaming, I won't know if you're crying or not, your grief is for you, not for me, it doesn't matter. It's a very stoic, almost comforting view of the afterlife as a place of quiet rest, not fire and brimstone judgment.
Speaking of funerals and graves, we cannot end this deep dive without talking about the Highgate Cemetery incident. Because this story it's like something Edgar Allan Poe would have written, but it actually happened to her family.
It is the ultimate Gothic horror story of the London literary scene. So Christina is buried in the Rossetti family grave in Highgate Cemetery, but that grave was already infamous long before she was laid to rest there.
Because of Elizabeth Siddal, Dante Gabriel's wife?
Exactly. When Elizabeth died of a laudanum overdose in 1862, the same year Goblin Market was published, Dante was overcome with grief and guilt. He felt he had neglected her for his art and his other affairs.
So he makes this grand, dramatic gesture.
The grandest. At the funeral, just before the coffin was sealed, he took the only manuscript of his unpublished poems, his life's work up to that point, and he slid the book into her coffin, tucking it into her famous red hair. He buried his art with his muse.
I have given everything to the grave. It's very dramatic.
Very. It was the ultimate romantic gesture. But fast forward 7 years to 1869. Dante is now more famous, but his eyesight is failing, he can't paint as much, and his friends are urging him to publish a new book of poetry. And he realizes the only copies of his best early poems are decomposing 6 feet under in Highgate Cemetery.
Oh, no. I know what's coming, and I still hate it every time I hear it.
He authorizes the exhumation. He gets permission from the Home Secretary. In the dead of night, with a fire lit beside the grave to ward off noxious fumes, a group of men dig up his wife to retrieve a book of poems.
That is just monstrous.
It is profoundly macabre. Dante couldn't bring himself to go. He sat in a friend's house, waiting. But the manuscript was retrieved. According to eyewitnesses, Seidel's body was remarkably preserved, and her red hair had continued to grow, filling the coffin. The book was taken out, disinfected, and published.
And Christina knew about this. The whole family knew.
The whole family knew. It was a dark cloud over them. Christina, with her profound sense of the sacred and the profane, must have been horrified. She knew her brother had desecrated his wife's grave for the sake of his career.
And then she had to be buried in that same plot.
Eventually, yes. It really highlights the fundamental difference between them. Dante sacrificed other people, even the dead, for his art. Christina sacrificed herself, her happiness, for her faith. She is buried in that same grave, but her legacy is completely untainted by that kind of monstrous selfishness.
That's a very powerful distinction to make.
But despite all this darkness, the exhumation, the illness, the constant renunciation, her public legacy is surprisingly bright. I mean that literally.
We're talking about Christmas.
We are. If you go to a church service or even just a shopping mall in December, you will hear Christina Rossetti. She wrote the poem In the Bleak Midwinter.
I had no idea that was her. I sing that every year.
It was published posthumously. The composer Gustav Holst set it to music in 1906, and later another composer, Harold Dark, did a version. It's consistently voted the best Christmas carol of all time by choir masters and experts.
And there's another one too, right?
Love Came Down at Christmas. Another staple. So the woman who wrote about goblin fruit and spiritual self-flagellation also scripted the coziest, most beloved moments of the holiday season.
Contradictions just keep piling up.
It shows her incredible range. She could do the simple, pure, perfect devotional lyric just as well as the complex, knotted psychological drama. And In the Bleak Midwinter is actually a profound piece of theology. It contrasts the majesty of God with the humble, freezing reality of the stable. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. It's beautiful and real.
And her influence didn't stop in the church. The modernists who came after,
Right.
they respected her.
They did, which is rare. Usually the modernist people like T.S. Eliot and Virginia Woolf despised the Victorians. They thought they were stuffy and sentimental. But Virginia Woolf wrote about Rossetti with real respect. She saw that Rossetti wasn't just spilling her emotions on the page. She was a master craftsman. She cut away everything unnecessary, creating these hard, gem-like poems. The poet Philip Larkin was a huge admirer, too.
And we found some bizarrely contemporary pop culture connections when we were researching this.
Very weird ones. J.K. Rowling. The title of her first crime novel, The Cuckoo's Calling, is a direct quote from Rossetti's poem, A Dirge.
And the Beatles? Is there a Beatles connection?
Indirectly via Yoko Ono, her song Who Has Seen the Wind from her 1970 album Plastic Ono Band, the lyrics are almost verbatim from Rossetti's children's poem of the same name.
That's amazing. And Bear McCreary, the composer who does the music for huge shows like The Walking Dead and video games like God of War.
He composed a beautiful choral piece based on her poem song When I Am Dead, My Dearest. Her work is just, it's everywhere. It's in the hymnals, it's in the universities, it's in the pop charts, it's in detective novels.
One last fun fact, to humanize her completely. We think of her as this ethereal spirit, this saintly, otherworldly figure, but she was also, well, a nerd. She was a stamp collector.
Get out. Seriously.
A serious philatelist. She started collecting stamps in 1847. The first adhesive postage stamp, the penny black, was only issued in 1840. So she was a very early adopter of this new hobby.
That is fantastic. I love that detail.
It's such a mundane, earthly, orderly hobby for someone with such a tumultuous inner world. The sources say she wrote letters to her brothers, asking them to save stamps for her from their travels. It makes her so real. It reminds you she was a person sitting in a room, maybe a little bored, carefully sticking stamps in a book, while also thinking about the vastness of eternity.
It grounds her. So if we have to summarize the Rossetti paradox, what is it? She's a contradiction in every possible way.
She is. She's the model who critiqued the artist's gaze, the passionate romantic who rejected marriage for religion, the quiet recluse who engaged directly with the grimmest social problems of her city.
It feels like her power, her entire creative engine came from that one word we used earlier, refusal.
I think so. In a world that was shouting, her brother, the critics, the Industrial Revolution, she found her power in silence, in saying no. She built a fortress around her soul, and by locking the door upon herself, she actually preserved her genius. She didn't burn out in a blaze of glory like her brother. She burned inward, like a star collapsing into itself.
And the result of that collapse, the light it gives off, is Goblin Market.
The result is Goblin Market. So that is our challenge to you, the listener. Go read it, but don't read it as a sweet nursery rhyme. Read it as the controlled explosion of a repressed genius who saw everything and said almost nothing until she picked up her pen.
It's a wild, unforgettable ride.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you on the next one.
Goodbye, everyone.